Hello everybody, welcome to today's Learning Lab and thank you for joining us. So on today's Learning Lab we are going to be taking you through best bank reconciliation and the best practices for bank reconciliation. So just before we get started, let me start with the usual introduction. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Fiona Dunge. I work in the customer success team here at Acuity, and running today's session is going to be Franco. Franco is now one of our consultants and working with our support team. So he's going to be running today's session for us. I will just go through some housekeeping with you. So throughout the session today, your microphones will be muted. You'll notice that there is a question box on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar panel. You can pop any questions that you have as we go through the session. You can pop them in that question box, and at the end of the session, I will read those questions out. Alternatively, at the end of the session, there'll be also the opportunity to take yourself off mute and you can ask any questions away at the end. So either option's there. Also, today's session is going to be recorded. So if you have anybody in your team that was unable to make today's session, you'll be sent a copy of the recording via email after today's session. So please do feel free to share that with any colleagues that was unable to make today. Okay, I think that's all the housekeeping from me. I hope you enjoyed today's session. I'm going to hand you over to Franco.
Thank you, Fiona. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome once more to today's Learning Lab. I'm Franco, and I'll be presenting this afternoon's Learning Lab. We've had a cloudy start to the day here in Northwest London, but would you believe I've just had to close the blinds because the sun's shining in my eyes? Is that for irony? But anyway, I trust everyone is keeping well and looking forward to today's session. Let me get started. So what you should see on your screen now is today's agenda, which is on the topic of bank reconciliations, its automations and best practices. I will begin by giving an overview of the Intacct reconciliation methods. You'll be pleased to know that I will also be conducting some product demos to accompany the slides, so it would not just be a PowerPoint presentation. I will also be explaining a bit about the Intacct reconciliation rules and rule sets. And whilst I'll be providing tips throughout the presentation, I'll also later give an overview of some of the other recommended best practices whilst performing reconciliations. And as ever, we will conclude the session with some time for questions. But before I continue, I'd like to just quickly mention that I'll be using my Sage Intacct demo stroke test system for today's demonstrations. And this site is provided by Sage and has been based upon an American firm, which I don't believe to have any association with Trump, but it does mean you will see dates in an American format. The data is also quite old, so you will forgive that there will be some my demonstration will revolve around some of these data transactions. So let's get a move on. Let's start with an overview of the type of bank reconciliations. So as the current slide denotes, there are three methods of conducting a bank reconciliation in Intacct. A manual one, the traditional ticking box exercise, the statement imports, and also via a bank feed. We'll be taking a look at these in more detail. But before we do, just a couple of points to note. So where you reconcile an account depends on whether the account was created at the top level or within an entity, and whether there are restrictions set up for that account. So things to be aware of there. So be sure to reconcile the account in the same entity in which it was created. And with that in mind, let's look at a traditional bank reconciliation first. So with a manual reconciliation, a user will manually match or otherwise clear Intacct transactions based on a physical bank statement that they're holding or looking at on a screen. When reconciling an account manually, the first screen you'll see will look like that which you're seeing on the slide now. The information entered in this screen in the highlighted fields there are vital to performing a successful reconciliation. As you might imagine, the incorrect information entered here will result in potential issues with the reconciliation, and we've come up against things like this in support on a number of occasions. So the statement ending date is the closing date on your bank statement. The statement ending balance is the closing balance on your bank statement. The information in these fields must match the information on your bank statement. If they don't, then as you'll appreciate, then this is likely to result in an issue. So you can find that, for example, you can't reconcile the account to zero, you're missing transactions, or have additional transactions on the reconciliation screen. You'll note that there's also the ability on this screen to attach files to the reconciliation. So that's useful for things like an electronic copy of the statement. So if ever you need to reference it again, it's there for quick access. Right, so this is the first of our demos. So allow me to switch to my demonstration screen. Right, so let's navigate to cash management, reconciliation, and bank. So for this demo, I'm selecting my that bank account there. It's got today's date, that's fine, and it's got a balance that looks about right. So let's click continue. Actually, yeah, sorry. So you'll see that I've got a few transactions there, and for the purpose of exercise, that's just fine. And the amount that needs to be cleared is up in the top left-hand corner there, and that just happens to be exactly what I've got listed there. You'll see that when you first come into the bank reconciliation screen, it now defaults to unmatched. So these are the transactions that need matching. You'll later see in the other demos that when switching to match, these, there I will find the transactions that have been automatically matched. But for this manual reconciliation, I'm just simply ticking the boxes, matching against the statement that I'm looking at on my other screen or in hand. And once I'm happy, I can clear the transactions. They've all been reconciled. You can see that the top right hand corner now is clear. And if I'm happy to proceed, I can simply click reconcile. Or if I wanted to save that to pick up on again later, I could do so. But for the purpose here, let's click reconcile. It tells you it's successfully reconciled the accounts, and all being well, I should have a report that's telling me what's been reconciled. Nice and easy. Let's close that down. So that's the manual reconciliation in a nutshell. So before I go on to talk about the more automated reconciliations, the statement imports and bank feed reconciliations, I think it's appropriate to first present the rule sets to you, and this is because rule sets are a prerequisite to the setup of statement imports and automatic bank feeds. So let's move on to the next slide. So what you should see here is a very simple diagram, essentially indicating that rule sets comprise of a series of what I want to say here is that rule sets comprise of a series of instructions that Sage Intacct uses to deal with the transactions being imported into Intacct, be it via a bank statement import or an automatic bank feed as mentioned. These instructions are called rules, and there are two types of rules. So matching rules and creation rules, which is what the diagram shows. Matching rules are the instructions essentially used to match the bank transactions being brought into Intacct with the cash book bank transactions which have already been recorded in Intacct. The creation rules, as you might expect, the instructions Sage Intacct uses to create the Sage Intacct equivalent of the bank transaction being imported. Okay. So let's take you through rules setup. So I'm going to switch back to my demo system. Come out of that. So once again, in cash management, this time I'm going into setup, and here under reconciliation rules, I'm going to click on matching and creation rules. Okay. Here we can review the existing rules or create new ones. But for today's demo, I'm going to create a simple matching rule which matches transactions on just date and time. So essentially what it's looking at is, does the transaction being brought in have the same date or a value as a transaction already Intacct to create that match. So I'm going to click on the add button. I'm going to start off by checking that it's indeed a matching rule. It is not a creation rule. I'm going to observe protocol with my list, and I'm going to create the next one in sequence. And nothing too imaginative here. And just copy that and paste it in there. I'm going to keep it as active, so as soon as I've saved it, it will be available for selection. You'll see the next section here are rule filters, which can be used to essentially whittle down volumes, of transactions to help refine the matching and creation rules. So we'll see an example of that in just a moment, but for now, I'm going to skip that because I'm simply creating a matching condition. And for that, I scroll a little bit further down to the bottom here, and I'm going to add the matching conditions I mentioned. So I'm going to state that the amount on my bank transaction has to be equal to the amount field in my Intacct transaction. And likewise with the date, the dates have to match. Sorry. So those are the conditions on which I'm setting up this rule set. When I'm done with that, happy with that, click on save. I'm returned to the rule list, and you can see my newly added rule there. Whilst I'm in this list, I can see that there is a rule here. There is bank fee that was created. It's a create rule designed to create a journal when it finds a transaction in my imported transactions with a description bank feed. So let's go and have a look at that. And you can see this rule has actually got some filters. So the filters are simply stating that it's going to start looking at transactions that are posted after, in its current state, the 1st of January. But because I'm starting afresh, I'm going to pick again. Remember the American format. I'm going to start it. I want it to pick up transactions after the 1st of November. So that's where I will make that change. Filters, transaction type equals debit. Great, that's what I'm expecting to see if I'm looking for bank fees, and hopefully there's going to be a description that tells the system it's a bank fee. And I know that because I've obviously seen my reconciliations before. I know that my bank posts my bank fees with a description of bank fees. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be entering here. Down below here, you'll see this is the instruction to Intacct as to create the journal. And you'll see that if I click here, I've got two templates. I've got an interest template and a bank fee template. And if I view the bank fee template, very simply, it's a template that tells the system that when it finds the bank fee, it's going to post the amount to my bank charges ledger. Yeah, nothing too complicated there. And you'll see also that I can add a template on the fly. If these don't already exist on your system, you can just simply come in here and click add and build the template that you just saw. As I've made changes, I'm going to click save. The warning up top there really reminded me that be conscious of the fact that this may be in use with other, already specified on banks. This rule set might be there and it might have an impact. So, but I know that I'm okay with that. So I've clicked save. So we're back to the rule set list. I'm done with rule sets. Actually, I've missed a bit. I didn't associate it with a bank. So let me just very quickly go back there. Pick up my bear with me. If you give me 1 second. Right, sorry, just lost my way there. So I'm in rule sets, which is where the rule sets that combine all of the rules created live. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call upon those rules that I've just created or amended. So I'm just going to click add here. And again, I'm going to stick with protocol. I'm going to pick the next number in sequence. And I'm going to call this a demo rule again. There we go. It's active, and again, account type to be associated with is bank. I could create a new rule on the fly here, like the one that you saw me create a moment ago, but as it's been created, I'm just simply need to select them. And I'm going to select the bank fee rule and the demo rule I just created. Add and close. Great. So the points I wanted to draw your attention to here, it's very important that creation rules are run after a matching rule. And this will avoid transactions being created in error. So this will also ensure that the rules match what they can first, and then what remains of the imported transactions will either have a corresponding transaction created or will need to be matched manually. Therefore, please switch rules around if that's the case. So you can do that by simply dragging and dropping here, but as you'll see, my creation rule is, in this case, after my matching rule. So I need to now assign this rule to an account. So I go to Accounts and select Account. And I'm going to pick 300. That's absolutely fine. Save. Great, so that's rule sets. I'm going to click Done here. Let's go back to my slide. So now that I've got the rule sets in place, we can look at the statement import reconciliation. Quick note before I come to my demo. So the statement import provides a means, as you might appreciate, of importing your bank statement into Sage Intacct for the purpose, essentially, of a faster bank reconciliation, because the ticking exercise is quite time consuming. So we're trying to speed up that process. So we take the transactions that the bank gives us in an electronic form, and we can import it. The Sage Intacct will facilitate the import of transactions from a CSV or a QIF file format. So hopefully your bank will be able to provide one or the other or both. Sage Intacct will also auto match transactions on the import file with the transactions intact using a rule set, as just demonstrated the creation of. And just to recap, Sage Intacct will match what it can based on the rule set, and the remaining transactions can then be matched manually. So if those that haven't been matched have to be done manually, which is understandable. Allow me to demonstrate this to you then. So I'm going to switch back to my demo environment. So I'm going to go back to cash management, to all and transactions. I'm going to start off by going to bank transactions import files. I'm going to add a file that's I've downloaded from the bank. First of all, let me pick the bank in question. Okay, a bit of information there. So I'm going to continue. So I'm going to select the file I wish to import, and I want number 2. Not many there, just a few transactions. There's a nice feature here to review the transactions before importing. So it goes through a process of essentially compiling this screen for you, so you can quickly assess the file before it comes in. I think a useful feature there. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to click continue with the import. So a message appears, we're in the process of importing your transactions, which can take a few minutes. And what we'll do, so it's automatically popped up to leave the site. I'm going to say yes. It brings me back to my bank import file list, and you can see the status there. what I simply need to do is refresh here. And what I would expect this to take, well, certainly from my other tests, it's probably about a minute or two. What I'm going to do in the meantime, because I wouldn't expect us to be waiting that long, let's go and essentially take you through the demonstration of the reconciliation on a bank statement. So bear with me, I'm going to click done there. So what I'd like to do now is, if I go into cash management again, all and bank, so I'm going to pick, in this example, bank account 300. It's got a date of 12th. Let's change that to today. I think that figure looks about right. So let's continue. So sometimes what you'll get is a slight pause whilst the system checks through the rule sets as well as the transactions that have been imported. But what you should expect to see here is essentially the system's attempt at matching the transactions from that import file. So this is one in a true Blue Peter fashion that I've created earlier, because obviously didn't want to keep you waiting. And I know that there is a value here that's uncleared, clearly by the transactions shown here. If I just click on matched, it's matched one transaction. If I click that with the bank, match and apply filters, and there it is. So given the condition that I put in place, it was able to match one transaction with an amount and a date. So very, simple, but evidence of a reconciliation through statement import. Again, as before, I can click the reconcile, I can save, or if I would like to, I can go back and manually match the other transactions. What I haven't pointed out, you've seen me click between the two of them, if you're not familiar with bank reconciliation, is the fact that with the automation, there are two tabs. There is of course, the Intacct that we had earlier, and the bank representing the transactions that are coming in from the bank. In this instance, of course, it's an import, statement import, but you'll see in shortly how that represents or will represent the bank feeds, the direct connection to my bank through bank feed. Right, let's save that and switch back to my statement, sorry, my slides. So let's now look at the bank fee reconciliation. So this is based, as you might appreciate, upon a online connection to a bank account, i.e. the bank account to be reconciled. As the name implies, the bank transactions to be reconciled are fed into Sage Intacct and reconciled as they are imported, making reconciliation, I'd like to think, far easier and more efficient, because we've just taken out a couple of steps, the ones I've just demonstrated, out of the way. This is now a direct link to the bank. So as you'll appreciate, it introduces significant time savings with every reconciliation. And as you begin to refine the matching and creation rules, I'd like to think you you become more effective, more efficient. Before I go on to my demo, just very quickly, this screenshot will show you how to configure your bank feed if you haven't already done so. So you've got to first of all subscribe to it and configure it in your subscription section of Intacct. Once you've done that, the Banking Cloud tab will appear against the bank that you're wishing to connect. You'll find the connect button, and when you press that button, you'll come to the screen that asks you which bank would you like to connect with. So I will not be covering the setup of the bank feed today. However, if you'd like guidance on it, then please contact us. You can use the email address on our last slide. I think that's Fiona's address. So we can arrange time to perhaps show you that in a bit more detail. There may actually be recordings and whatnot that we can send to you for that. But I won't dwell on that too much. Just want to simply point that out. So let's now look at an example of a bank feed in action via a brief demo. I'll just quickly want to mention again that this bank feed is provided by Sage. This is the bank feed in my demo system. It's designed to work like a live bank connection, and it will download some sample transactions that Sage have set up for us. So let's switch back to my demo system. So again, as we're in this screen, I will stay in this screen. I'm now reconciling a different bank account, one that I've set up for bank feeds, and that's this one here. Again, forgive the dates, but what's important is I've got today's date in there and a balance which again looks about right. What's also important to note here is that there's an applied rule set too. So if I click on it, it'll tell me which rule set it's using. So I'm happy with that. Let's click continue. Again, a slight pause as it works its way through the rule set and the transactions that it's got to download. Again, this is only demo, so there's not many transactions. Maybe you may have to be prepared for a slightly longer pause on your side, especially if you've not done a reconciliation in a while. It's got to download all those transactions. So let me just quickly right, so when the rule sets have been run, the system will present the following list, which is as before, defaulting to unmatched transactions. If I switch to bank, slight pause, and again, all my transactions. Now, I've got a clue here that something good has happened, good for me at least for the purpose of this demo, in that uncleared is 0. So that suggests the matching has worked. So let's go and have a look. What has it matched? Fantastic, it's matched some transactions. And given that the uncleared is 0, it would appear it's matched. The rule has matched the same value and quantity of transactions. So that's a good thing for this demo. What I'd like to do, you'll see that I've been flicking through these filters. You can get quite clever with filters. If you want to filter the list down further, especially when you're looking for transactions to reconcile manually, and the list is very long. Also, something to bear in mind is if you go into more actions, you've got the table size here, which you can change. So if you're only looking at 10, 20 rows, you can switch to a maximum of, well, it looks like all rows according to this. So I've got that set in my preferences as well. If you're not familiar with that, or if you want that set as a default going forward, you can go and set that in your preferences. But here, which is where it's taking out all rows from, but if you haven't got that set and you just wanted to change it occasionally for your reconciliation, that's where to do it. The point being here is that there's been a successful match, and again, as before, I can continue, I can click save here to continue reconciling at a later time, or if I'm happy, I could click reconcile. But the important point is that it's reconciled, and this demonstration has gone well so far. Right, let's move on to best practices. So obviously I've mentioned a few tips here and there, but let's look at some other good practices. So as demonstrated, use the bank transaction assistant file import process, which is what you saw earlier, for a more, what would I call it, a more robust import experience. There you can upload multiple files. I know I only demonstrated one today, but you can upload multiple files for daily or weekly imports with the bank reconciliation process. And for each import file, make sure you upload only the delta or the new transactions to avoid duplicate transactions. So yeah, be methodical in what you're downloading. If you're going to use that means, be methodical in what you're taking from your bank, the files, so as to avoid any duplicate imports. Also, you can use the bank transaction assistant file import to import transactions that are missing from a bank feed. So if there are issues with your bank feed, you can use this import means to overwrite your reconciliation progress, or remove the, if you wanted to, you could remove the import file to continue reconciling with a bank feed when it comes back online again. Create or record transactions with your foreign currency bank only in that bank's currency. For example, with a euro bank, you should generally transact only in euros. This enables you to reconcile all transactions correctly to your bank statement. Of course, there are exceptions, but then you will expect to have to introduce other considerations when it comes to reconciling. Important point, next one, only disconnect the bank feed if the wrong bank connection was selected. You need to log in using a different username, or the bank feed service is no longer required. So the point here is, if you disconnect and change your mind, the reconnection process can take weeks to complete, so be aware of that. If you're having trouble refreshing a bank feed, do not disconnect the bank feed. Instead, wait until you see a bank feed status of partial status or failed, and refresh the bank feed. So this is, I didn't spend too much time, but this is the panel at the top of your bank reconciliation, which tells you the status of your bank feed. Or if you go into the bank, where I showed you earlier where the connect button is, when you have a successful bank connection, there you will have a status of your bank feed. So again, something to look at in more detail when you've got a moment. If you decide to disconnect an account, Sage Intacct removes any unreconciled and unmatched bank feed transactions for that account. Any matched transactions become unmatched, and bank transactions are removed from Sage Intacct. So bear that in mind. Before you reopen a reconciliation, so there is the option, as you might be aware, to reopen a reconciliation if you need to go back and change something. You picked the wrong transaction, for example. So before you open reconciliation, excuse me, save a record of your cleared and open items. So go to reconciliation histories page and generate a reconciliation report and an outstanding items report. Make sure to note statement end balances as well. After you reopen a reconciliation, you need to reconcile or re-reconcile for that period and any later periods. So for example, if you're currently in the month of August and reopen the reconciliation for June, you need to re-reconcile for June and July to take you right back up to August. So, you know, when you bear that in mind, if you've got an error to correct, you know, is it going to cause you some hassle? Is it worth just posting a journal to correct a wrongly allocated or reconciled transaction? So something to bear in mind there. How are we doing for time? I'm gonna have to speed this one up, I think. So I think this is important. Most frequently asked questions on support. There's really two main ones. Okay, why is there a difference in my reconciliation? And why is my bank feed not downloading the latest transactions? So to answer the first one, consider the reconciliation process. Consider what we've done today and the importance of the accuracy, specifically of the information being entered at that initial stage of the reconciliation, at that pop-up where you select the bank, i.e. making certain the statement ending date and balance are correct. As you appreciate, if these are entered incorrectly, there will be a mismatch in your figures. You know, the rest, in my mind, simply boils down to the selection process, you know, whether manual or automated, just selecting the right transactions. We sometimes see that transactions have been wrongly selected because you may have selected one that later was reversed or voided. That can happen. So you know, do be careful as to which ones you select, especially if you've seen duplicates. Go back, check to see what those transactions are if you're not certain. So you know, the beauty is you can leave the reconciliation running, or you can save it while you flick away to another screen and check the details on those transactions. Sometimes if the source of the difference is not immediately obvious, it's simply best to work backwards, or, you know, or dare I say, start again. You know, clear the match transactions and revert to the last known good balance, a good point, and begin the matching process afresh, because it will save you some time. If you're missing transactions, review the dates being used and whether you should be reconciling at the top or entity level, as mentioned at the start with those points made. Consider a manual reconciliation if there's an issue with the bank feed, or if rule sets are not working quite as expected. Again, or if there are transactions missing. Remember, it's best if reconciliations are initiated from the bank tab, as essentially that's essentially what you're verifying. So you saw earlier that there's two tabs, the Intacct tab and the bank tab. So when you're doing manual reconciliations, make your focus on the place your focus on the bank tab, because that's where you can essentially create other transactions, especially if they're missing and you want a new transaction in Intacct to reconcile against the one that's come through from the bank. Right, this the second query. I think it's important to point out that on their website, Sage state how, and I quote here, that there are different levels of quality and availability for bank feeds, and this is determined by specific banks. Many connection issues are due to the bank or the connection provider and are not in Sage Intacct's control. So Sage advises that Intacct automatically refreshes bank feeds about every 4 hours, and you should have all of the previous days transactions available to you when you log in the next day, effectively. However, in some cases, it can take up to, here again I quote, 5 business days for transactions to appear, especially when considering a weekend or a bank holiday weekend. So I think there's a bit of cover in that. If you are experiencing or missing transactions in a bank feed, Sage recommends checking with your bank if those transactions require authorization, or if your bank feed connection requires, if I can underline this, reauthorization. So something's happened to your authorization of a bank feed and it requires reauthorization. So we've seen that before. The customers contacted their bank and for whatever reason, their bank feed needs to be reauthorized. So bear that in mind. Now a couple of points to note. Bear with me, Fiona, I'll be with you. Bank feeds are bank connections are limited to 20 accounts per bank login, and some do not support Intacct financial institutions. So very quickly, their financial institution is a facility that Intacct provides to link many bank accounts in Intacct to one physical bank account. So bear that in mind. And up to 200 bank feeds can be set up free of charge in Intacct. 200. So that's quite a few before I think a charge is considered. Lastly, there's a useful bank feeds troubleshooting guide available on the Sage Intacct online help site. And if you'd like more information about dealing with bank feed issues, go and have a look at that. With that in mind, given how long I've been rambling on, I'm going to skip this. And we're straight into the questions and answers, Fiona. Have we got any questions? Hopefully I've covered everything.
I think you've gone into a lot of detail on there. Thank you for running that for us. There's no questions coming at the moment. Like I said at the start there, if you do have any questions, now is an opportunity where you can take yourself off mute and ask us away, or you can pop a question in the question box and I'll read that out. So we'll just give that 30 seconds just for any questions to come through in case there are, and then I will wrap up. Thank you.
There was a lot to take in there, so thankfully I think the recording will help people. Yeah,
definitely. No questions have come through, but we will send a copy of the recording out to you via email afterwards, so you can revisit that and share that with your colleagues. I'm also not sure if the slides are shared from the session, but if you do want to have some of the slides as well, we can also get a copy of those out to you. Just pop me an email. So if we just flick to the next slide on the presentation there, Franco, thank you. So if you do have any questions as well that come to you after today's session, please feel free to drop me an email. My email address is there on the screen. Also, if you've got any suggestions for future topics, again, we really appreciate those. So on any feedback, so please drop me a message on my email address. Our next Learning Lab is going to be on the 21st of November, and it's going to be for, really this is appealing for any new users. So we'll talk them through how to access support, how to raise ideas on the community, how to raise cases on our community, look at the help and resources that are available to you through Intacct and also through Sage. So it's a good session to join for any new users or anybody that's new to Intacct, just a way of pointing them on where to find all of those resources that are available. That'll be on the 21st of November, so please do keep a lookout for your invite. I hope that you found today's session useful. I think that's everything from us now, so I wish you all a pleasant rest of your day, and thank you to Franco for putting that on for us. Thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Good day. Bye.